Great. So, hi, I'm Birnie. I'm going to take you through a temporal hike that I did recently in the Malham area in the North Yorkshire Dales. A little bit about me. I am a technical relationship consultant with the Ordnance Survey. I work with our public sector customers. I've only been working in geospatial for around 6 years since I graduated. I changed my career, but we won't go into that. And I love a map just like the rest of you. So my main experience is in flood risk, civil engineering and training on Qgis, but I'm really passionate about data visualization, and this is the kind of thing I do in my spare time when I get some, to be able to just take some fun data and make something interesting. So what I'm going to demonstrate, here's a little preview, is a little walk I did recently, and using the temporal data from the GPX data from my Garmin watch to visualize just a little cheeky video of the walk and changing the symbolizations and things like that. So Liam showed GPX data from his previous one, but mine is doing my data is a lot, the level of detail is in seconds, so we have a lot more data to work with. So I'm going to show you how to use the temporal controller to do that. The requirements of this, just to let you know, will be QGIS 3.14 or above, and after the conference I'll provide the GPX files for yourself to play with, the geopackage of all the edited files, some style files and these slides and a tutorial so you could actually follow it through in your own time. So let's go to QGIS. So the first thing this workshop is going to be sort of like a quick run through of how I would do everything. I'm not going to go through every single step. I've got everything loaded already in, just in case the internet goes down or anything else. So the original data is in a GPX file, which obviously you can just drag and drop into QGIS, and it will bring up a box. And obviously there's only data points in those two, so I would go ahead and just add those into the map. Right. And it will bring up something that looks like this. So when you look at the data, the limitation of this data sometimes is, obviously, it doesn't look like I was over there. So we need to clean the data a little bit first. The GPX watch, particularly because I was near some buildings, it's not particularly accurate sometimes in getting my location. So when I switched my watch on for the hike, it thought I was over here. Then it got a little bit more detail, and it eventually figured out I was here. Now the accuracy obviously doesn't look that great when it's this kind of level of detail, but overall when you're moving in a straight line in non-urban areas, it's pretty decent. So what I did was to go and save it out into a geopackage, because I couldn't figure it out why, but I cannot edit this in Qgis. And this is my first foray into this temporal controller. So I just didn't know how to edit the raw files in Qgis, and maybe something that someone else might know and be able to tell me. So I just moved it out into a geopackage. So then I used my edit tool to look at the data points, and I figured that the first 20 points were rubbish. So I just highlighted them and removed them from the data set. And I did the same thing with the tracks, just removed the vertices. So once I had done that, I saved it out into, sort of saved the files just so I didn't overwrite any data. And there's my finished data set with the start points and the erroneous data point up here completely missing. So just to have a look at the data set itself, it looks pretty good. This is called Mass Styles Lane. It goes up to Malham Tarn, and we just did a nice hike route round from about 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And because it's in seconds, there is a data point for every single bit. But when I looked into the data a little closer, I realized that every time we would stop, the watch didn't, sorry, is there something in the chat? Yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. When I looked into the data a little more closely, I realized that every time we stopped, this is lunch. So we were there for over an hour. We had a cheeky little nap and a bit of lunch, but unless you stop the watch, it won't stop recording. But then I realized if I had stopped the watch, I would have over an hour of missing data points. So I decided to leave it in, but that is a limitation of this particular level of detail of the data. And when you symbolize it, just take that into consideration that you're going to have a lot of things. So we'll talk more about that when I load the temporal controller. So, and urban buildings are also a bigger problem. So I went through a walk through just a local village, and the data points were meters and sometimes nearly half a kilometre out of step, because the buildings completely throw it off. So it's just a note that this kind of level of detail in this Garmin Forerunner was quite high. I'm just going to look at my notes, bear with me a sec. So when I wanted to style the data, my original idea was to have cute little SVGs of me walking along. We'd seen some nature, so I wanted to kind of add some interest along the route where we stopped for lunch, and a few other bits to kind of make it a little bit more interactive. So I wanted to add some styling and some labeling. So I cleaned up the data a bit by removing any null fields, and then I added in a classification and a label, so I could then add in some styling later on. So I knew where on my walk I had seen, for example, a weasel. So it was here. Right, bear with me. We had stopped for a little while here because we'd seen a weasel in this field. So I selected a number of data points around that weasel spot, and then I would use the field calculator to update an existing field, select classification, and then type in nature time, for example, as a classification, and just only update those features there. And so I went around my map and I added in different sort of events like lunchtime or flapjack time or all those types of things around the route, and labeling in the same manner using the field calculator, adding in a label field, so I could kind of identify different areas of where I would like to add some interest into my map. So once I'd gone round to do all of that, I ended up with this data. So I decided that I wanted a walking man going left, and then I wanted a sun cream stop. So I found an SVG of a sun cream off the internet, and then I wanted him to carry on walking. And then I wanted, there's quite a lot of data, as you can see. And then we saw a weasel. So I thought nature time and some weasel. So I found an SVG of a weasel, for example, which I'll show you just in a moment. And I went through and just thought, what do I want it to look like? I didn't, and you sort of seen a preview of that in my little animation. So I've gone through and I've styled everything. So I'm just going to pop that styling up and show you what it looks like as one. So style, well, not save style, bear with me. And I've saved them out as a layer style file, so which I'll provide you, and get to load that style. And so as you see, I've got lots of SVGs, one of it walking left, one of it walking right, one of it walking away. So it kind of looked like I was going around the map. There was a little bit of a nap. So all of these are now just pointing towards my classifications, and the labels are pointing towards the labels. So if I click OK, it should change that. So if I zoom to layer, it obviously looks completely, it doesn't make any sense. So once you've got it all styled up and you're happy with sort of your data points, then we can start loading the temporal controller, which if you go back into your properties, it is now native into, is there a question, Paul, sorry?
No.
No, that's fine, don't worry about it. I was just a bit paranoid, I saw a little thing. So in your properties, if you scroll down, there's a temporal controller, and to switch it on and off, you would just click this button here. Now in this particular data set, it's just a single field with the date and time. However, you can have fixed time range, separate for start and end time, separate for event durations and expressions. I've only played with the single date and time at this point. But I can imagine there's quite a breadth of things that you can do depending on your data. Now I know that my event duration is in seconds, and I don't want to accumulate features over time. So I'm going to click OK. And once you do that, you can then use the temporal controller panel, which is here. If it's not showing in your Qgis when you load it, it's right click on your menu panel and your temporal controller, and it will bring it up as a new layer. So at the moment, I don't have anything loaded into the temporal controller. That's how you would turn it off. And this is how you would sort of switch it on to show your data. And that's got a current range, but that's just fixed time. And this one is for your animation. So I'll bring it back to the start. You can have multiple different temporals, obviously, in any one given workspace. So if you aren't seeing anything here, so that's my first little walking man. If you want to change the data set it's pointing to, if you just click on this little drop down, set layer range, if you've got additional data, you can just select which one and just press that refresh, because then it will make sure that your animation range goes from first data point to your last data point. If we just run it as what it would normally do, so 1 second, and there's another additional setting of your frame rate in this cog, it's just doing it as 1 second. But if I were to play it, it's literally going to set every single second. So that would take quite a while to run. If I zoom in on it, it will show you how it moves. So every single point, it will change to that one. I haven't set it to cumulative range, so it's not going to build up that data. But obviously that's going to look quite boring for an audience. So I was playing around with it and making sure that it went at a speed that looked good when you were presenting. So I fixed 15 seconds for this, and when I went into the frame rate per second, I did 40. And that was trial and error, just playing with the numbers and playing it over and over again. So if I were to press play now, it kind of looks a little bit more usable for a presentation, and you can export this out to video, which I'll show you later. So I've got a little bit of labeling, hopefully to make the audience laugh a little bit, or just to see what happens. So I'll let that run through and see, make sure it does work. Oh, look, the weasel. I couldn't find an OS SVG pull, so sorry about that. And obviously at lunchtime, we're there for so long, these particular parts take quite a lot to get through. I would like to investigate more about how to make the amount of data run a bit more smoothly. So obviously I've got my walking man going right. The temporal controller is actually really used. Its predecessor, Time Manager, I used a little bit, and that was quite good. And I'm hoping that some of the extra functionality will come through with that. If it did still hurt a bit. So yeah, 12.5 miles, I was absolutely knackered. That was a first lockdown, post-lockdown walk, so it was quite a long way. But the other thing I wanted to show you was, oh, excuse me, I think I wanted to show you is just how changing these frame rates and things and the cumulative range on some basic data without any styling. So if I go back to the hiking data just with the classifications, and add the temporal controller to that one. 1 second. Okay. Just check. And then you can cumulative range. So if you wanted to, rather than have the tracks underneath to show you route, you could have no route on there and press play, and it would, obviously I would change the styling from a pink dot, but it would kind of show the route as you went rather than showing where the track was going to go, which I thought was quite good to show as a track going along. And I can imagine the styling elements of that to be, you could play around with that a lot, make the dots and the tracks appear behind it. As the more, I'm not sure why this is happening, I haven't been able to fix it, but as you get more and more data on the screen, it does start to flash. And I think it's because I've got the step at 15 seconds and the frame rate at 40 and the amount of data points I've got into this. The other thing that you could do is to save out of this. This data set was so big, the video just wouldn't play on this particular laptop. I will try it on my personal, but this temporal controller, you can export animations. So if you press save, it has sort of like a template PNG. You can output that directory. You can set the extents, calculating it from your layers, your output width and height, and then you can fix the range. So you can do the whole range or just a small snippet with this step frame, and it will save it out as a video so you could turn it into GIFs. That's something that I did play with, but I wasn't successful because there's just so much. Each of the frames is one kind of image and there's just thousands of data points, so it just took a little bit too long. I think if you had a smaller range of data, that would be a really cool little gift to make. It's just I did run out of time and I didn't get to do that. So yeah, that's kind of a short, sharp view into the temporal controller and what it's capable of. I did have some inspiration for this, so I'm just going to go back to my presentation. So how I learned how to do this was by these blogs I found, and I have a feeling that some of them are on the call, so that's like, oh my god, they're Twitter famous to me, so it's quite unnerving. So I found some blogs of how to do this. I couldn't find exactly what I was doing particularly, but it's great inspiration to have these blogs out there so you can learn how to use these things. And obviously the Underdark GIS, that's how I learned how to use Time Manager. And when they did a blog about how to use the temporal controller, I thought it was great. Right, let's move on to the new thing. So yeah, that's kind of all I had to show you, and I was wondering if anyone had any questions about it. It was quite difficult to figure out what exactly people wanted to see in terms of the temporal, so sorry that was a whistle-stop tour.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, that was really a whistle-stop tour, wasn't it? But it's all good content, and it's a great introduction to that kind of Tempura time manager element of Qgis, which I'm sure many on today's call have found useful.
Sorry, I talked so fast then, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I like the fact that you shared some of your inspiration at the end, which I think is really important. And something we're keen to do as part of GeoViz, which for those that may not know, Claire is actually going to take over the running off going forward, is to share some of that content that some of these people that have inspired Claire and others to put this type of animation or maps together through our GeoViz pages on our website. So Claire mentioned people like Alistair Ray and Toppy, who have done some cool stuff with this before. I'm going to hopefully have conversations with those type of people, and hopefully they'll allow us to share some of their great content, which they are quite openly sharing amongst their blogs and their social channels. But it means that we can kind of have it all in one place. So hopefully they'll be quite open to that. And then if anybody wants to access some of that content, then we'll make sure it's there as part of our GeoViz pages. Now, obviously, you've animated that data, Claire, but it's obviously a walk that was very personal to you. I just wondered, with the fact that Liam showed us a map of a personal journey he had taken earlier on, and I know that you mentioned to him in the chat, was he doing any commissions? Has he inspired you to perhaps make a similar map of the journey that you've taken and used as your data for that workshop you've just given?
I see his Twitter, and when I saw that originally on Twitter, I was like, oh my god, I need that for my house. But I know that I could probably do it myself, but and now he's shown us kind of like the methodology. I reckon I could absolutely replicate that and use my own little spin on it. And that's what I get out of these sessions, is people just showing you. It's like a gateway drug. You're seeing something and then you're like, I know I could do that. I will be providing some sort of more step-by-step how-to stuff, so people can follow along if they're not familiar with Qgis, or if they're not familiar with the temporal controller. But it is really great to see that even just showing someone it's possible gives them that drive to be able to go and have a go themselves. But yeah, Liam's map was absolutely beautiful. Mine was a little bit more, basic, but it was the first steps, and I can see where I can go from there. So I've now done that the first time. I think I will maybe take a shorter walk, because that was obviously 12.5 miles of data. Take a shorter walk and make it more into kind of like little fun gifts and things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think Helen's made an observation in the chat, but that was great, thanks, Claire. And this is more of an observation. The element of temporal controller that I find particularly challenging is getting time data into a temporal format that Qgis can recognize, as it has quite specific requirements.
completely agree. Part of this presentation was going to include like a little caterpillar effect. So you had your first data point and it followed along for like maybe a few minutes behind it. So it had this rolling caterpillar. But yeah, I experienced that exactly. And that's why I haven't included it in this, because I would have to take the data out into Excel to basically add 10 seconds or a few minutes onto it. And then the way I fixed it was to, when I was in Excel in the CSV, formatting the date time format to do year, month, day, hour, minutes, seconds, rather than what Excel wants it to do, which is day, month, year. And that's the only way Qgis will accept that time format, is year, month, day first. So that's how you could fix that, Helen, potentially. That's the way I got around it.
Cool.
I didn't want it to fail when I got here, so that's why I haven't included it.
No problem, Claire, no problem. We have got another question that's just come in from Jason Marshall. He says, "Hi Claire, thanks for the tutorial. Definitely given me some ideas. Is it possible to use the temporal controller along with the print layout?"
I hadn't gotten to that stage. I did try and do that, but I haven't been able to use it with like you could obviously make it a print map, but that's not something that I know how to do, unfortunately. But it's something you can maybe post to the Qgis folks, or any of the other bloggers who may have more experience than me, because this is my first go of temporal controller. I'm super new at it. So
yeah, it's not, I mean, I've used it a few times. It's not something I've ever tried. I mean, normally when I use it, I just export the frame so that I can put a GIF together. But it's an interesting
save
question.
function would save out as a video, and you could potentially work with those kind of their JPEG files or like PNG files. You could probably work with those, but it's not as in the print layout section of Qgis.
Well, Jason, it's worth saying there is actually a BCS forum where if you have questions that perhaps we haven't been able to answer today, if you sign up to the BCS forum, you can pose these types of questions to anyone that signed up to it, to the wider community. So I can certainly share a link to that if you want to sign up, and I'll ask the question through there.